Tinitua ni Junta ni Mina 37 na Legislature in Guam. For the prayer, Clerk, would you please determine whether we have a quorum?
Senator Barnett, Senator Blas, Senator Brown, Senator Dueñas, Senator Fisher, Senator Lujan, Vice Speaker Muñoz Barnes, Senator Parkinson, Senator Perez, Senator Canata, Senator San Augustine, Senator San Nicolas, Senator Shelton, Senator Titagui, Speaker Terlahi.
Gagitu.
Madam Speaker, there is no quorum.
Sergeant of Arms, could you please call the senators for session? Recess. We're back from recess. Session's been called to order. We're now on the prayer. Will Senator Roy Kanata kindly lead us?
Colleagues, please join me. Heavenly Father, we come to you in prayer for all the policymakers gathered here today in our good work for the people of Guam. We ask you to guide our thoughts and our words as we deliberate these policies so that we can help the people of our great island. Give them the wisdom, the strength, and the insight so that their decision will benefit all our children living here. We also pray for those who are still recovering from Typhoon Mawar, those who are working hard to restore peace and order to our island. Bring your healing comfort to all those who have been affected by Typhoon Mawar, especially those who are first responders and responding swiftly, and other personnel on the front lines in response to these efforts. Finally, we ask you to bless all the people of Guam with your grace and mercy. Help them through these challenging times with the faith and trust in you. In your name we pray, amen.
Senator. To express a never-ending and never-forgotten gratitude by the people of Guam, the legislature recognizes recipients of Imaladan Mastakulu na Sakrifisu on a display in the Guam Congress building and during each of its sessions. For the recognition of a recipient of Imaladan Mastakulu na Sakrifisu, Senator Barnett, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On behalf of a grateful island and country, we honor Staff Sergeant Enrique Salas Cruz and the family of Staff Sergeant Enrique Salas Cruz for making the ultimate sacrifice in service and defense of our island and our country.
For the recitation of Inifresi, will Senator Joanne Brown kindly lead us?
Gini mastaklo, gini hasoko, imastaklam, gini corazonho, zani masfigo inanan sinaho, ufresin maisazu parabai protehi zanu defendi, ihinengi, ikutura, ilengwahi, iairi, ihanam, zani tana tomorrow. I renshako director ginini zu ustata, estina fitma gihulu biblia, zani bandarahu ngwahan.
Would Senator Frank Blas kindly lead us in the singing of the Guam hymn, and Senator Dwayne St. Nicholas in the singing of the national anthem.
Panogi tamoru purita nota kantai matunanya gitoru iluga parahi honra parahi gloria abiba isla sen parahi honra parahi gloria abiba isla sen utoru I tempo I paz parahita zangin langit na bendición contra peligro na fansafoham Deus protege Island Guam contra peligro na fansafoham Deus protege Island Guam.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming
Masi. Kindly be seated. Good morning, colleagues. Clerks, please take the roll call.
Senator Barnett, Senator Blas, Senator Brown, Senator Duenas, Senator Fisher, Senator Lujan, Vice Speaker Munya-Barnes, Senator Parkinson, Senator Perez, Senator Kanata, Senator San Augustine, Senator San Nicolas, Senator Shelton, Senator Taitigui, Speaker Talahi. Madam Speaker, there is a quorum.
Sijus Masi, clerks. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Buenas Hafade, Madam Speaker. I move to approve the legislative journals dated April 24, 2023, May 30, 2023, June 1, 2023, and June 19, 2023, subject to corrections.
There's been a motion to approve the legislative journals on those dates. Is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Thank you, Clerk, for getting all those journals done. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Sedus Masi, Madam Speaker. There are communications and petitions, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
On the motion that communications and petitions be appended to today's session journals, are there any objections? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Sedus Masi, Madam Speaker. There are messages from Imega Hagen Guahan, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
These messages are also located on the drive attached to the agenda. On that motion to append the messages from Imega Hagen Guahan, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Reports of standing committees. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Sedus Masi, Madam Speaker. There are reports of standing committees, and I move that they be appended to today's session journal.
Is there any objection to that motion? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Sedus Masi, Madam Speaker. There are no reports of select committees.
Sijus Masi, kindly proceed.
Madam Speaker, I moved that bills introduced, bill numbers 140-37 COR through 142-37 COR, and resolutions introduced, resolution numbers 147-37 LS and 148-37 COR through 149-37 COR, be deemed to have been given their first reading.
On that motion regarding the first reading and introduction of bills and resolutions, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're now on motions. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Sedus Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to excuse senators not present for today's session.
Is there any objection to excusing senators not present today? Hearing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, you are recognized under motion.
Sedus Masi, Madam Speaker, I move that all congratulatory, commendatory, and condolence resolutions introduced today and for the remainder of this legislative session be considered first read and adopted, to allow the Legislative Council to make technical corrections and to add all senators as co-sponsors.
On that motion, are there any objections? Seeing no objection, motion carries. We're still under motions. Is there any other motion?
Yes, Madam Speaker.
Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Sedus Masi, I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture the nomination of the Honorable Elizabeth Barrett Anderson to serve as a member of the criminal...
sorry, Senator. I think those are already on the agenda. They're under legislative concurrence. So we'll,
Okay,
we'll get there next.
Okay.
So under motions, is there any other motion? Senator San Augustine?
Madam Speaker, notwithstanding the House rules, I move to place Bill 130-37 COR as introduced by myself, co-sponsored by Senator Roy Canather, Senator Lujan, Senator Dwayne Nicholas, Senator Will Parkinson, Senator Chris Duenas, and Senator Tom Fisher. An act relative to authorize the extension of concession agreements of the Antonio B. One Penn International Airport Authority, Guam, and that we allow the 5 days for public review onto the session agenda because it's going to be posted today. So allow the 5 days. So it'll basically be the last bill on the agenda.
On that motion, is there any objection? Is there any objection, Senator Titesby? There's an objection.
No, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I would just have an inquiry about the time frame when, if it's going to be posted in 5 days, when will we be able to speak on the measure then? What day would that be, is my question.
If it's placed on the agenda, it's placed on the agenda. It's going to come up when it comes up. Unless
it comes
we
up, it
make
comes up.
motions
No,
to
no, 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 no,
unless we make motions to recess and we come back at recess.
Madam Speaker, there was a motion made that it meets the 5-day rule before it goes on the agenda, before we address it. So that's a motion that's already in play. The question I had asked is, what is the 5th day to make that? That was my only question I had. I'm not objecting, but if you're saying, I mean, you're twisting it a little bit here, so it's just a very simple question. And if the author of the motion...
Senator San Agustin, could you please restate your motion? Or would you yield to the question about, I'm not sure the question, yield to that question and please restate your motion? Because I heard a motion to place on the agenda.
That's correct, Madam Speaker, but the motion is also to allow the 5 days for the public review onto the session agenda, which would basically bring it to Monday, once it's posted today, if allowed by the body.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My question was answered.
On the motion, is there any objection? I object. All of those in favor, please raise your hand. Motion carries. Still under motions, is there any other motion? Under motion, is there any other motion? If not, I don't see any hands, so we're under legislative concurrence. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Sejus Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture the nomination of the Honorable Elizabeth Barrett Anderson to serve as a member of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Commission with the recommendation to do confirm.
Just 1 minute recess, please. 1 minute recess. Back from recess. Thank you. Majority Leader, could you kindly please restate your motion?
Yes, Madam Speaker, Sejus Masi, I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture the nomination of the Honorable Elizabeth Barrett Anderson to serve as a member of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Commission with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion to place in the voting file the nomination of Elizabeth Barrett Anderson to serve as a member of the Criminal Injuries Compensation Commission, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Sejus Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement and Statistics, Research and Planning the nomination of Jason W. Baza to serve as a member, classified employee of the Government of Guam, representative of the Guam Banking and Insurance Board with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion to place that nomination in the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Sejus Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement and Statistics, Research and Planning, the nomination of Stephen R. Hollister to serve as a member of the Guam Environmental Protection Agency Board of Directors with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion to place that nomination in the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader? Senator Roy Kanata, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move to place to the voting file the nomination of David J. John to serve as a member of the Guam Academic Authority Board of Directors. Speaker, with the recommendation of the Committee on Infrastructure, Economic Development, Simon Sanchez High School, Disability Service, Self-Determination, Historic Preservation, Housing, Public Economy, and the Guam Build-Up to do confirm.
On that motion to place the nomination of David J. John onto the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries.
Thank you.
We're still on legislative concurrence. Is there any other motion?
Yes.
Majority Leader, you are recognized.
Sedus Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Maritime Transportation, Air Transportation, Parks, Tourism, Higher Education, and the Advancement of Women, Youth, and Senior Citizens the nomination of Yolanda M. Padrones to serve as a member of the Guam Community College Board of Trustees with the recommendation to do confirm.
On the motion to place in the voting file the nomination of Yolanda M. Padrones, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Sedus Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Maritime Transportation, Air Transportation, Parks, Tourism, Higher Education, and the Advancement of Women, Youth, and Senior Citizens the nomination of Donald I. Weekly Sr. to serve as a member of the A.B. Wampat International Airport Authority Board of Directors with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion to place the nomination of Donald I. Weekly Sr. into the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Majority Leader, Senator Shelton, you are recognized.
Sedus Masi, Madam Speaker, I move to place in the voting file from the Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation, Labor, Procurement and Statistics, Research and Planning the nomination of Alexandria Sandy Gould-Yao to serve as a member of the Guam Real Estate Commission Board of Directors with the recommendation to do confirm.
On that motion to place the nomination of Alexandria Sandy Gould-Yao to the voting file, is there any objection? Seeing no objection, motion carries. Is there any other motion under consent calendar? Under legislative concurrence? If not, we are now on consent calendar. There are no items. We'll proceed to second reading file. In the second reading file, the first bill is Bill number 20-37 COR. Senator Parkinson, you are recognized.
Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill number 20-37 COR-LS as amended by the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture on the third reading file. An act to amend Section 2103 and 2103 and 2014 of Article 1, Section 2201 of Article 2, and Sections 2701, 2702, 2703, and 2705 of Article 7, all of Chapter 2, Title 10, Guam Code Annotated, relative to restoring access to federal public assistance for otherwise eligible individuals with felony drug convictions on the third reading file, and I would like to discuss it.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. Is your motion, can you clarify if the bill is as amended by the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture?
Yes, ma'am, as amended by the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture.
All right, so we're now on Bill number 20-37 COR, as amended by the Committee on Health, Land, Justice, and Culture. It's on the drive. Senator Parkinson, you may proceed.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Federal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Reconciliation Act of 1996 puts a lifetime ban on public assistance for people convicted of drug felonies. This was signed into law by then President Clinton during the War on Drugs era. People convicted of rape, murder, and other violent felonies are not similarly banned from public assistance. Section 115 of this measure proposed a lifetime ban permanently disqualifying otherwise eligible individuals from receiving public benefits provided by Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, also known as SNAP, and the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families Program, also known as TANF. Under this ban, if a person has been convicted of a federal or state felony offense involving the possession, use, or distribution of a controlled substance, including cannabis, they are not eligible. Federal law allows states and territories to opt out of this ban, and 49 out of 50 states have opted out in some form. South Carolina and Guam remain the only two jurisdictions in the United States with such a ban. Bill 20-37 would opt Guam out of the SNAP and TANF ban for drug offenders like the 49 other states that have done so. Additionally, whereas public assistance like SNAP and TANF is denied to Guam residents who are convicted of a felony offense of possessing a controlled substance, felons who are convicted of violent yet non-drug related crimes such as murder, domestic abuse, or armed robbery are allowed to receive welfare benefits upon release from incarceration. Make that make sense. Most people returning home from prison had been struggling in some significant way prior to their involvement with the criminal justice system. Surveys consistently show that substantial portions of people who are incarcerated have histories of substance abuse, mental health issues, homelessness, or physical or sexual abuse. The stigma of the criminal conviction and incarceration alone makes the re-entry process increasingly challenging, but particularly damaging for people who are trying to re-enter society after a period of incarceration only to be restricted on eligibility for public assistance. Public assistance designed to provide subsistence level benefits for people who cannot afford to feed themselves or clothe their children. SNAP and TANF may be particularly critical to prevent recidivism among formerly incarcerated individuals transitioning back to their home communities. In this context, SNAP or TANF help these individuals to meet their basic survival needs during the period in which they are searching for jobs or housing, thus reducing the likelihood that they will return to criminal activity to secure food or other essentials for themselves or for their families. We should not punish people who suffer from drug addiction for life by taking away food from them and their families, especially when such stability can provide a pathway to work and productivity in society. We need to address the portion of our population that does not work, cannot provide for their families, and are caught in cycles of poverty. More often than not, people coming out of our prison system need some form of assistance to adjust back into society. SNAP and TANF provide basic food assistance to those who could not otherwise afford it. And without that base of support, they are more likely to stay out of the job and fall back into drug addiction. We have also seen how natural disasters like Typhoon Mawar have made it increasingly difficult for our people to buy necessities like food with the Disaster SNAP program currently ongoing. Thousands of people every single day are lining up for assistance, and those with former drug felonies should be allowed to line up with them. They need this assistance just as much as everyone else does. Food, water, housing, every single person has the right to all of these things, especially those who may be struggling to get back on their feet. We have to recognize drug addiction as a public health crisis and begin to treat it as one. Denying people food on their path to recovery does not serve the interests of Guam or its people, and I urge my colleague to support this measure. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Parkinson. On the bill, would anyone like to be recognized on the bill? Senator San Augustine, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Just a simple question for the author of the bill.
Restate your question.
Is there any other, because it's in reference to felony conviction, is there any other restriction other than this that is placed on the food stamp, on the food assistance?
The author yield to that question.
Yes, sir. I believe this is the only restriction on food assistance is just the municipalities of Guam and South Carolina. With everyone else in the country, they have opted out of this ban.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the bill and ask the author that I be added on as a co-sponsor. Thank you.
Thank you. On the bill, would anyone else like to be recognized? Senator Kanata, you are recognized.
Obviously, I'm a co-sponsor to this legislation, but I rise in support of this legislation and I commend the main author of this bill because it's time to give people a second chance. And, you know, we obviously sometimes have some issues in our lives and unfortunately make some bad decisions and choices in our life. We all have that opportunity to do so. But obviously, this is a second chance for individuals that, to reset their lives and get back on track with recovery, right? So we want to make sure that they have an opportunity to redevelop their lives and grow with the community. So I again support this legislation as a co-sponsor and I commend the author. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, Bill 20, anyone else? Vice Speaker, you are recognized.
Manana Sidus and Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to speak and rise in support of this bill and thank the good sponsor for introducing it. Madam Speaker, now more than ever we see how many support services are making a critical impact in our community, and as we overcome COVID-19, Typhoon Marwar, there are many in our community who need these services so that they can rebuild and be more resilient. When individuals in our community commit crimes after they serve their time, we need to do our part to help them be rehabilitated and become productive members of our community. Madam Speaker, we need to make it so that there is an ability for these individuals to survive so that they don't turn to a life of crime, and so that we can reduce recidivism. As someone who has been an investigator for the Public Defender Service Corporation for over a decade, I have met hundreds of these individuals, and they want to make a better life for themselves, and they need our help. And for this reason, I want to share, Madam Speaker, I'm in full support of this measure, and I respectfully request that our colleagues literally look at this measure and give it a favorable consideration, and if the author of this legislation does not mind, I hope he too can consider me to be a co-sponsor. But thank you for giving me the opportunity to rise in support of this measure. Sizus Masi. Sana Masi.
Sana Masi, Vice Speaker. Is there anyone? Senator Taitui on the bill?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Good morning to my colleagues. You know, I had an opportunity to do some research on this, but wasn't quite sure on some of the other laws or other states that have just modified mostly than just completely allowed this type of program to be lifted for those who are convicted felon. So the difference between Colorado and Connecticut, those individual ones, it says here that they modified their laws to allow individuals with prior felony drug convictions to regain eligibility for TNF and SNAP benefits by successfully completing drug education and treatment programs. This was brought up during the public hearing, so my question is to the author, has this been considered to be placed in the bill to allow this type of treatment programs or even drug education programs before they avail themselves of this SNAP program?
The sponsor yield to the question.
Yes, Madam Speaker. Yes, in discussions with people that ran these programs, these safeguards are already in place. They already encourage people to go to these treatments, as well as they have mechanisms in place to prevent abuse and waste and recidivism if they do step out of the line, basically.
So, Madam Speaker, am I continue?
You still have
Okay.
the floor, Senator.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Well, actually, that didn't answer my question because it wasn't a yes or no if the programs are in place. So once again, I'm going to ask, are there in place programs requiring individuals who've convicted of a felony to take these programs? Is it required?
I do not believe they are required, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Speaker. It was mentioned earlier in the conversation that only Guam and another particular state have, are still waiting pending the change, but I don't think that's correct. I'll ask the question to the author of the legislation, what states have opted not to allow this type of program for convicted felons?
Senator Parkinson, would you like to yield?
Yes, ma'am. South Carolina and Guam.
So they, and those are the only ones that opt not to go through with it, but yet they're, okay, that's, I guess I'm getting the wrong information. Maybe my information is like a couple years old or something, but I will get with the author of the legislation just to clarify that concern that I have. And thank you for the opportunity, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Chaidgui. Anyone else on the main motion? Speaker Terlahi, I will recognize you at this time. Please proceed.
Thank you. I stand in support of this bill and would just like to, as committee chair who heard the bill, I want to say that I'm grateful to the sponsor for bringing this up because it pointed out a gap that we have in our community. And this gap very much impacts women and children and others. So there was a research done in 2015 by the Sentencing Project that examined data from the U.S. Health and Human Services reports, the Bureau of Justice Statistics, and U.S. Department of Agriculture Food and Nutrition Service, and several other studies on the ban on TANF and SNAP benefits. And what it found was that there was no data to substantiate that the ban helped to prevent or reduce drug abuse and drug-related crimes. However, the ban was linked to increased rates of recidivism, harmful to public safety and health, and contributing to swollen prison populations. The ban also was not shown to be effective with the reduction of welfare fraud, but was proven to be a barrier to the successful food security, re-entry into society, family reunification, successful escape from abusive relationships or households. And those impacted by the ban were found to be women, children, and communities of color. Women comprise the vast majority of recipients of both TANF and SNAP benefits. Law enforcement and sentencing trends in recent decades show a sharply rising number of women charged with drug offenses. And the number of women in prison rose compared to the increase in men. Dependent children who have committed no crime themselves are immediately impacted by the ban. Racial and ethnic disparities in drug offender incarceration resulting from the war on drugs, law enforcement and sentencing policies have disproportionately impacted African Americans and other minorities of color. For these disproportionately lower income populations, a sudden loss of a job or change in family circumstances severely impacts their stability. And since the TANF and SNAP bans were enacted, most states have taken action, as the sponsor stated, except for Guam and South Carolina. They were still the only ones with a full ban in practice. And relative to an earlier speaker's question regarding drug testing, so that was raised at the hearing. We did inquire with public health if that was something they thought we should put onto this bill. But their testimony stated that in most states, they are relying on the probation and parole when these people get out of prison or are released in sentencing, that's where drug monitoring would take place. Not in their food benefits, but on their regular sentencing and whatever the judge requires them to do to be placed in the community in general. So they said that most states, that condition for drug testing was the burden on probation and parole officers. So again, I stand in full support of this bill. And the testimony that we heard at the hearing, I thought was very good. People who literally will be impacted by this, who had been impacted by this, and because they were able to get SNAP benefits despite their previous offense, they were able to renew their lives and really start again. And now we've got them to be social workers and counselors in our community, helping others to change their lives and support their families. So, si Diyos Masi, I support this bill.
Buen provecho, Speaker Terlahi. Senator Joanne Brown, you're recognized at this time.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. You know, I'm going to vote for this bill, and I think at a most fundamental level, I think it's important that everyone has the opportunity to eat food. I mean, that's a basic thing that we need to exist. But I also want to relay, and I don't think in any means the message should be there that by supporting this bill, we're supporting the dynamics of what's leading and what has led to the challenges our community, as many communities in the U.S. mainland, are faced with. Some of our major cities, and particularly San Francisco in particular, which I have a fondness for, but you know, seeing the continued decline of the impact to their community and their society of where they are economically now, because it's becoming a city that's unsafe to be in. I mean, my goodness, their main, just a week ago, their main shopping mall essentially has turned it over to the bankers because they just don't see the future, at least in the immediate future, that people are going to be coming in droves as they have in the past to visit San Francisco. So it's just not worth holding on to anymore. Can you believe that? Wow, what a major change because of what's going on. You know, I was raised in a time where, you know, you were expected to be responsible for the actions that you take. Don't take what's not yours. Go to school, get educated, walk a straight line, and you'll have a good life. And we've gotten to the point in our community, unfortunately, for a whole variety of reasons at different levels, that our drug problem is a growing problem. And it's one that in every single facet of our life affects all of us. Whether you have yourself or you have a family member who's addicted to illegal drugs, you're a victim of it. Every single member in our community is a victim of the growing drug problem that we have on our island. The fact that going through a fast food drive-through is just about the amount you need to go buy your drugs these days is very telling about the amount of illegal drugs that are in our community, because the price of it has dropped so much that it's reachable for just about anyone and everyone who wants it. And it affects people from all different walks of life. You think, oh, it's the uneducated, it's the unemployed, it's, gosh, some of our most sophisticated people walking in our community, the most stylish with the nicest clothes and cars and status, are on it. In addition to that, our growing crime problem that we have on our island, the sense of not feeling safe in our own community, in our own homes, is attributed to the drug problem on Guam. We have important people in this community that rub shoulders with drug dealers in this island. We know who they are, they know who they are, but what happens? Nothing. They're major investors in businesses that we patron. What happens? Nothing. And yet more of our people become victims of use and misuse of illegal drugs in our community. So I will support this bill, but I'm not going to be saying I'm doing it because, oh, you know, wow, it's an in thing these days. As a matter of fact, it's a growing problem that's eroding our community and our society and our young people. If you have a child or grandchild, I'm sure that's a thought that's crossed your mind. Sometimes we just need to call things for what it is. You know, we want to be too politically appropriate and savvy, and we don't want to hold people responsible for their own actions. We want to say that they're victimized by the community that they live in. They're victimized by their upbringing. They're victimized by the abuse that they've received. And somehow that's a free license to go ahead and do the very same thing to others. And I think we need to call that out. I think at some point we need to say enough is enough, that this is not acceptable, that you don't go and take what is not yours. My goodness, the elderly in our community can't even be safe. You can't even leave things in your garage because you're worried someone's just going to walk up and take it. When you leave your house, make sure your security system's on. Make sure you've enclosed yourself as if you're in your own prison at night to be safe so that your family can go to sleep and hopefully wake up safely the next day. That's what our island has come to. And a major contributor to that is the misuse of illegal drugs in our community. And I give anyone credit that's able to grow from whatever challenges they have. Who doesn't? Who hasn't? Who doesn't have a family member or friend, or even a close friend that has gone through this? I have. I have a very good friend that I grew up with. Very same opportunities and experience in life, who went out there, not only abused drugs, but, was helping distribute it. Was arrested, convicted, served time in jail. I never looked at that person differently because we were the same. We came up the same. And at some point, that person got their lives together and went on to do very well and is a very hardworking business person in this community. And I give that good friend of mine even more credit because the road that individual walked was even harder, and yet they did it. They took it and they were successful with it, and they turned their adversity into something even better and worked even harder to make their lives better and their family better, and their family proud of them ultimately. So yes, it's possible to grow from it, but by no means we should make this seem that this is ever acceptable. Because you know what? If you can go and buy drugs, you can go and buy food. But people make choices, and sometimes they don't make the best of choices, and sometimes their families suffer as a result of their bad choices. We see it every day, and I just think it's not okay. It's not okay to say, oh, look what happened. Let's just let it go. If we want a better Guam, if we want a better future for our children, because you know what? Like my dad once told me, I've lived most of my life, Joanne. You have your whole life ahead of you. It's up to you to decide how you want to live your life. It's up to you to decide if you want to study for school. I'll always be here to support you, but at some point you're going to have to take on your own responsibilities. But that's your choice. And my father never dogged me again about making sure I did my homework, or making sure I studied, or making sure I was a good student, or making sure, oh gosh, you got to do all this to make me proud. That was never a conversation we ever had to have again. Because I knew the responsibility was mine to determine what future I wanted. And I think we need to start ensuring there's greater sense of self-responsibility, that there is right from wrong, that you just don't get to abuse and harm this community and think, I got second, third, fifth chance. Because at some point, I don't know what it is that we need to take before we say, you know what, enough is enough. This is not okay. We need to make responsible choices in our lives and our community. We each have an individual responsibility to contribute to that. So I do support this bill, but I'm not, doing it with great fanfare to say, oh, everybody's a victim. Because the bigger victims are the innocent, hardworking people in our community that get up every day and go to work and do what they need to do to take care of their families, and they carry that burden entirely on their shoulders. It's the elderly in our community that have worked very hard all these years and have retired that should be able to live in peace in their homes and not feel unsafe because they're worried someone's going to come and take what they have in their home or harm them. And that's the community we live in today. Very sad reality, whether we want to talk about it or not, whether we want to acknowledge or not, because we spend a lot of time focusing on those that perpetuate the crimes out there. We call them the victims. They're the victims that we need to be concerned about. Well, maybe we do, yes. But the ones that are harmed the most are the innocent people in our community that do the right thing, and yet they become victimized. Because other people choose to make bad decisions and irresponsible decisions, and some downright selfish decisions, because they're only thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about their children. They're not thinking about their parents. They're not thinking about their brother, their sister, their neighbor. So colleagues, I just think it's important as we pass this and say, yes, you have an opportunity. Yes, you have a road for a promising future. Yes, we will provide the support to you to do that. But we also need to ensure that people start thinking that they have a sense of personal responsibility. Yeah, sometimes you just got to make the right decisions. Because we should not be sitting condoning and supporting this type of behavior, because this is what's leading to the degradation of our community and the lack of safety in our community that our people feel every single day. And all we need to do is look at the newspaper, what few are left. All we need to do is listen to the radio stations and programs, what few are left. And now we're down to one evening news channel when you hopefully get your cable back that you can watch. And all we hear is about the continued crime in our community. My goodness, last week to hear that a child was doused with gas, you gotta wonder. You got to wonder what's going through people's minds, parents, whoever they are, caretakers of these innocent children that would even think to consider to do something so crazy, to harm an innocent 3-year-old child. And that's happening right here in our community. What a shame. So I don't hold this bill up in fanfare, because unfortunately this is an end result of the victimizations that's happening in our community. I hope people take the opportunity to do something positive with it and make better of their lives, but also hold themselves responsible for their actions. Because I don't see them as the real victims. It's our people that are the victims. And I think we need to remember that. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on this bill.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the bill? Senator Fisher, you are recognized on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and good morning to you. I rise, it's kind of with a mixed inclination. I rise in support of this bill. I understand what it is trying to do, but I also fully join in the reservations raised by the previous speaker. In my professional history, I've spent quite a bit of it, of course, in our courts of law, and I have seen quite a bit of the scourge of drug abuse. You know, the docket sheets in the Superior Court are exploding with people who are, you know, generally third-degree felonies for possession of crystal methamphetamine. In fact, just over the weekend, we saw a former hero here on Guam, a MMA fighter who was arrested yet again for drug offenses. It touches every single aspect of our society, and I worry very much about sending a mixed message here that we, in the law-abiding community, work overtime, essentially, to accommodate those who violate the social contract and hurt all of us through their actions, the importation, the manufacture, the possession, the distribution of crystal methamphetamine and worse. And here we are saying, in a sense, you do your time, but when you come out, you don't really need to worry about food insecurity because we're going to cover that for you. And it seems like we have truncated the very idea that actions have consequences. I think we would all agree that you break the law, you violate the social contract, there will be a consequence. You might have to go to jail for it. Frequently you do. And then when you are released from jail, well, when you commit a crime like this, I think it's incumbent upon society to let people know that these consequences may be lifelong disabilities. It wasn't too long ago that felony conviction prohibited you from exercising a constitutional right to vote for the people who we elect to govern. It is also very true that convicted felons have a greater obstacle to overcome in securing employment. That is a consequence of their action. It's not a consequence of anything we as a society did. Had they not engaged in these nefarious activities, well, then they wouldn't have those barriers to overcome. You know, everything I've said, I don't think anybody would gainsay what I've said. It's just the truth. But at the same time, this is a question of nourishment for people. Without getting overly spiritual or religious in this, I noticed that my brother, Senator Kanata, led us in prayer at the beginning of this session, essentially asking that we do the right thing. And it would be difficult, it would be very difficult to understand how doing the right thing would be to let an individual be malnourished and perhaps starve, and that would extend to the family. By no means do I mean to vitiate anything I said earlier. You know, actions have consequences. I just hope that we are as attentive to issues of food insecurity and as attentive to the plight of the poor as we are to felons. Here we are taking affirmative steps to make sure that people who have injured us through their activities are receiving certain benefits, and it's not clear to me that we are expending the same amount of effort, the same amount of verve, the same amount of enthusiasm on feeding the rest of our community. I hope we do. That too would be proper. Because these benefits that we are perhaps going to extend to convicted felons will require of us, our society, an open-ended commitment to provide these benefits. There is a reciprocal open-ended commitment from those who receive benefits under the program to stay clean, to stay law-abiding, to do what is necessary to improve the community as opposed to eroding the community, which they have been doing. So I also rise Madam Speaker, I also rise to offer an amendment. And I've spoken to the legal counsel about the amendment, and we're working on it right now. The thrust of the amendment is as follows. If you are receiving SNAP benefits, and if you are receiving TANF benefits under this program, you have a reciprocal obligation not to use controlled substances, and therefore you will be subject to random drug testing so long as you receive these benefits under this program. I've been working with legal counsel on that, and I think we just about have it drafted. Procedurally, I don't know how the chair would like to proceed on that. Maybe take a short recess while we have it passed out.
All right, she's sending it to the clerk, so we'll place it on the drive and pass copies out. So we will take a 1-minute recess, but I would ask that all senators, if you've got floor amendments, please get your floor amendments ready before you speak on the bill.
Yes, ma'am.
So 1-minute recess. We're back from recess. Senator Fisher, you are recognized. The amendment has been passed out.
Madam Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to have this, and thank you to the clerk's office for their always efficient work in generating this proposed amendment. The amendment simply reads, formerly convicted felons eligible to receive SNAP or TANF benefits under this act shall be subject to random drug testing for the duration of their eligibility for SNAP and or TANF benefits. Now, there is a relief clause in this. It says that 2 consecutive positive drug tests, consecutive, not just individual, but 2 consecutive positive drug tests shall automatically disqualify such individuals from continuing to receive the benefits. I don't believe this amendment is particularly jarring or earth-shaking. If we are going to make an open-ended commitment to continue to allow these people to receive food benefits, if we continue to fulfill our requirement to take care of our fellow islanders as we do, it is not unjust, unfair, or overly burdensome to require them to also remain drug-free. That is the very same phenomenon that got us in this mess. So I'm anxious to hear what my colleagues feel about this. Just a moment, ma'am. And so, ma'am, I proffer this amendment on the floor. Thank you.
On the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to speak on the amendment? Senator Parkinson, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I stand opposed to this amendment. I do not think that this should go on as an amendment. If this were to, if the author of this amendment would like to relitigate this question, I think the best avenue would be to do it as its own standalone bill. As it stands, I believe the amendment is redundant and it adds an unnecessary cost basis. Right now, as the bill has been written, it costs us nothing on Guam. It's federal dollars going in, no dollars going out, zero fiscal impact to us except the positives. But if we add this drug testing component, now there is a cost basis. Now this costs us something. As well, this is also a redundant thing because this is already a drug-free program. If we have concerns about people being on drugs while they're a recovering felon, then that's what the parole officers are for. They do drug testing. This is kind of their lane. So let's let the parole officers do their job and let's not add a cost basis to a benefit that will cost us nothing. Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Senator Taitagui, you're recognized on the amendment.
Sijus Masi, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of this amendment. I don't know where we get off thinking that we're supposed to make it easy for individuals who've broken the law. What happens to those who did not break the law, upstanding citizens? But here, we're allowing, a free-for-all to don't have to take a drug test. Yes, there's an additional drug test when going into the SNAP program for everybody. But now we're looking at a convicted felon who has to go through their own probation, guidelines. In fact, if I'm not mistaken, and I'd ask if the original author of the bill, Bill 20, would yield to a question that according to the bill itself, it requires them to fulfill their probation before they avail them of the SNAP program. Could I ask the author of the original bill if can yield to that question?
Would the author yield to that question?
No, I'm good.
Senator Tysker, you have the floor.
So he's saying, no, it's not required.
You did not yield to the question, Senator, so you have the floor.
So he refuses to defend his bill by not answering one of our questions. You know, Madam Speaker, this individual proffering in a bill, any of us proffering a bill, don't do their
On the
homework.
bill, Senator.
That's what I'm speaking on, Madam Speaker. I'm talking about the bill itself and how the amendment combines together to make it make sense. If an individual who's convicted of a felony, a drug felony, they should be tested. You're the individual wanting to, take this out, saying, no, it's not needed. We're just going to let them, free for all and not have to take any drug tests throughout the term they're taking SNAP programs. Madam Speaker, we are supposed to protect the people of Guam in the bills that we introduce in this body. We find other opportunities to ensure transparency, opportunities that allow individuals such like this program, I support the bill, to provide mechanisms in there for safety precaution reasons. We can't go back after how many people have tested positive and they're continuing to, we find out the individuals have been taking drugs, but it's okay because they don't need a drug test. They don't have to take a drug test. And we know doggone well, those same individuals are out using, but for them, it's okay. I'm still gonna get my SNAP. Doesn't matter. What kind of message are we sending out? You've got several states who've made amendments, several states, to this ban. The author of the legislation says, all but Guam and South Carolina. Right, that's true. They haven't addressed it, and Guam is addressing it now. But he doesn't, and he fails to bring into play that there have been amendments to those laws in the other states. Many amendments, and some of them require drug testing. Some of them require programs. What would it hurt? We're going to try to tell that individual. What we're trying to tell that individual is, we're giving you an opportunity to help you out. And all it takes is just a drug test to make sure you're on the straight and narrow. Don't you think that's incentive? Incentive for that convicted felon to go on the straight and narrow because there will be a drug test involved? And it's not just one, Madam Speaker, it's two consecutive. I'm surprised the author of the amendment only actually included two consecutive drug tests, not just one. What are we saying here? That it's okay to be a drug offender because guess what? I'm still gonna get this SNAP and we don't have to take any drug tests. Let's give them a reason to stay on the straight and narrow. Because we know how difficult it is for those who've served their time and trying to go out there and get a job. And here we are today trying to assist in that manner. But we're also trying to be responsible about it and trying to help that individual to stay on the course of cleaning up. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Senator Dueñas on the amendment, and then Senator San Nicolas.
Sidus Masi, Madam Speaker. I'm going to be efficient and speak a little bit to the bill as well, because I support the bill, but I do support this amendment. You know, Madam Speaker, the proffer of the amendment mentions that there is no cost basis. And I agree. One of the things I asked during the public hearing and others asked, public health, was would this ever displace anyone who otherwise needs this benefit, who is not precluded because they're not convicted drug users, they're regular people who, unfortunate for them, that don't have that affliction, but they are also individuals who, of course, are in need of food assistance. I was happy to know that no one's displaced, because this program is open-ended to the point of where individuals who apply, if they qualify, they get the benefit. And the more that apply, the more the federal benefit applies in the generosity of our national government. But I support this amendment really because of one scourge that exists and is so unfortunate with someone who's addicted to any form of drug, but particularly methamphetamine, which many of my good colleagues spoke to earlier. And that is the abuse of programs, the abuse of getting something and then turning it around and selling that commodity to continue to support a habit. Madam Speaker, there are ongoing cases in our courts. We know of this. We've had people, even in our own families, who come to us and ask us for assistance, and we know that they have public assistance, but they'll say, well, so-and-so took the card, went to some of the famous stores here and bought a bunch of high-end products, such as meat products and the like, and turned them around and sold them for nothing to continue to use. I don't know what kind of hell somebody's in to do something like that. But the fact of the matter is, that's a fact of the matter. You know, Madam Speaker, don't know his name off the top of my head, but I know it's in the committee report. There was an individual who was extremely compelling that came to testify on this legislation. He talked about how his life was riddled with difficulty because of his addiction in the state of California. And his road to recovery included availing of this program within that state. But he wanted to come home, and was made aware, either by coming home and figuring out, or knowing that when he came home, this benefit will no longer exist. This is an individual who has helped tens, if not hundreds, of our individuals on Guam recover from the scourge of addiction, particularly crystal methamphetamine. But the individual was also very clear that he knows and supports the fact that the program itself has those restraints and barriers. The author of the bill, in opposition to this amendment, states that probation and other mechanisms for ensuring violations and what would happen during violations are there for that. But I say it should be specific to this program. And I dare say, if we had that individual before us today who spoke so eloquently about his journey, I think he would agree with this amendment. But I close, Madam Speaker, because I'm voting for this bill as well, with or without this amendment. I hope this amendment passes. But I close because it is one of the things that just irks my soul, I guess, whenever I hear. Like I said, I don't know what kind of hell an individual is in to take food out of their own children or their own family's mouth by abusing a benefit. But I never want that hell to translate to the individuals who are supposed to get that benefit. Many times the individuals availing of this benefit are not necessarily doing it particularly just for themselves. They could be feeding a household that has 3 generations in it. An elderly, individuals who have brought children into this world, and most especially hungry children who need this. So if the Lord has touched your heart and you've made that transformation and you've turned your life around, and by golly, you should not be denied the benefit of nutrition and the ability to rebuild your life. But there doggone should be a safeguard to make sure that because of the scourge of your addiction, should it continue, that you could take 1 ounce of food out of a child's life. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Senator St. Nicholas, you're recognized on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I want to thank the author for authoring this measure. It's a really good thing. I often carry this book with me, and it says, "Believe in miracles, but don't depend on them." This amendment, I was mulling it over, and I was like, I think this amendment makes a lot of sense, and it keeps people honest. And I know that people who may have gone through this may have been found guilty and served their time, and I believe in second chances, but at the same time, you shouldn't always just give when you want to help hold people accountable and keep them honest, and that's where this amendment's, I think, taking us. And I applaud the author of both the amendment and the bill. I think it's a good bill, and second chances are great. I've seen people who have done some things and come back, and they're so grateful because they were given a second chance. And it's the miracles that I like to see all the time, is when actually people are grateful for what they were given and given a second chance. And they come out of that very resiliently and wonderful. I also wanted to make a point, and our previous speakers over there, how eloquent they are and bringing to light our drug problem. I've been talking about the drug problem forever. I know how devastating ice can be, how the addiction is so strong, it's just gripping and grabs you and encases you and just puts you in this horrible state. And so this amendment adds that extra mechanism, possibly to help them recover as well. And so I applaud the amendment. I applaud the author of the bill, and my good friend over there, Senator Fisher, for the amendment. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Senator St. Augustine, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On the amendment, I'm in support of the amendment, but I'm just curious. We all talk about second chance, third chance, so forth. But it says after 2 consecutive positive drug tests, so it automatically be disqualified. But there's nothing here saying that if you go to a rehabilitation after the second drug test, that you can get back on. And that's what normally all the drug users go through. They go to the rehabilitation program, and then they get back on track. And we hope they'll stay back on track. But just saying 2 consecutive tests, even though you go to the rehab program, You can't get back on. I think maybe the author may want to consider that and maybe write an amendment there that says 2 consecutive positive drug testing shall be automatically disqualified someone from continuing to receive SNAP or the TANF benefits. But if they go to the rehabilitation and they're cleared and they stay cleared, how can they get back on when the two consecutive tests bumps them off? I'm just saying is that we can't preach second chance, third chance, because after every event, then there's a second chance. But this doesn't give a second round. So I'm kind of like, I support the amendment, but there's got to be a course of action that the individual, because when the individual was prosecuted and he got out, that's his first chance. Yeah. Magaguet took drugs, okay, tested positive. He's not taking meth, but he's smoking pot, marijuana. Okay, second time. Okay, I stopped. I went to the rehab. But because the way the amendment is written, you don't have another chance. And we got to always leave just a little bit of room for people to get back on their feet. Because I know that defense attorneys will be arguing that there always should be another chance. There's always an opportunity to give everybody a second chance. Because for every event they do is a new event. It's not a repeated offense. It's different as when you say, I'm sorry, but you keep doing the same thing. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Senator Frank Blas Jr., you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise in support of the amendment. While I have to agree with the gentlelady from Tumon that the author of the amendment, the gentleman from EPAN, gave, when I looked at it, 2 consecutive drug testing, okay, I'll compromise. Because, while we're talking about an individual and getting him back on track, let's talk about why he was there in the first place. First off, you want to safely assume that these individuals who are eligible, who can avail of the privilege of being able to receive the assistance, are law-abiding citizens, that they are not a burden to a criminal justice system or to society because of what they did. I too believe in, okay, let's give them a chance. Where my struggle is at, Madam Speaker, is I used to work in that world. I used to come face to face with these individuals. I used to hear the reasons and the excuses given as to why they were doing it. Never once have I heard that it was good because it was for the good of the community, or that while I was on it or while I was distributing it, that I regretted or I knew that I was going to hurt somebody. Never once. Now, this is an opportunity for an individual who says, okay, you messed up. We'll get you back on track. We'll help you with that. What this amendment proposes is that we give you an opportunity to prove to yourself and to the community that you can do it. That's all this is. And it's random. It's not compulsory. It doesn't, I've known drug programs, random drug programs that ran for many years in different entities. I know of individuals who, while subject to the random drug testing, never got tested because they were never randomly selected. And if you're not using drugs, what do you fear for it? I never once feared ever having to take a drug test, whether it be random or mandatory or compulsory. Because I never used it. So what's the fear? You should fear it if you're going to decide that you want to try to deceive the system. Again. And the reason why this is going to be placed on you, and as far as a safety net, if you will, is you put yourself there to it. Nobody forced you to distribute. Nobody forced you to use it. Nobody forced you to commit a drug-related crime but you. And if you don't want to take the test, be subject to the random drug test, don't apply. It's your choice. So I don't see any fear in this amendment. I see it as a way to keep you on track. That's all it is. And if we want to get serious about dealing with our problem, a measure such as this will help. Ignoring it and saying that it's unnecessary and it's an intrusive of my rights and the other excuses that are given. What about for those law-abiding citizens that truly need the help, that also need the help? This is a long-standing issue and a long-standing problem. And if our government wants to do something about it, as the author of the amendment has stated, got to be very careful of making sure that the consequences to your actions help to dictate what your future can be. There's an old adage, you do the crime, you do the time. Trust me, when you do the crime, it takes a long time. So I stand in support of this amendment. When given the opportunity to speak on the main motion, I will stand in support of the bill itself as well. Thank you very much, Manager.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Senator Lujan, you are recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I stand in full support of this amendment. Likewise, given the opportunity to vote in the bill, I'd be in support of the bill as well. This amendment, Madam Speaker, and the bill itself actually is to give those folks an opportunity, a chance. You know, who of us in here has not done something in the past, not necessarily drugs, but that we have regretted and have paid for it in whatever way, whatever the payment it is, and we're given it a chance, either second, third, or fourth chance. Honey, I never do that again. But there needs to be a consequence as well. And I assume at this point as well that the organization or the agency that will be involved in again reinstating the SNAP benefits or TANF benefits, and the agency that would be doing the drug testing, or prior to the benefits being reinstated, will say that, hey, you know, this is your second chance, but likewise, you're going to be subjected to a random drug test. And just so you know that a random drug test, and should you fail 2 consecutive drug tests, that you would no longer be, you would be taken out of the program again. This amendment, Madam Speaker, and the bill in general will go to those, I mean, reinstatement of these folks are for those folks who truly want to change their lives. Truly want to change their lives, want to turn it around. They must not think for a moment that, oh, that's all right, I can fall off the truck again. I can get up and I'll still get reinstated. They got to think about it. It has to be in their minds as well that, you know, especially if they're supporting a family, and that, oh my gosh, I might lose this again. I may also lose whatever other benefits I may have, the drug tests. I may lose the housing benefit I have because of this. There has to be a consequence. There has to be, again, these are for folks who really want to change their lives and had made mistakes in the past, or have made a mistake in the past and want to change. And given, again, the opportunity for that change, I think we're going a long ways to be able to do that. And I think asking for or calling for 2 consecutive drug testing And the failure of that, if the individual or individuals fail that, they're doing just the opposite. They're not doing a good enough job or keeping up in their end of the deal to really change and be better members of society. We're welcoming them to be productive members of society. But if they decide to continue down that road, that's the decision they make. We said, we want to give you a chance. But now, it's up to you. We're saying, look, help me help you. Likewise, if they don't want to help themselves, then at some point, you just say, okay, already, this is upon you. So this amendment, again, Madam Speaker, just goes to again, the people who really, really want to change and really have looked at their lives and regretted that road they're going down, and maybe an opportunity for them to look back and say, hey, you know, I was on a better road before, and now look at where this has taken me. But you know, society is saying, look, I'm going to give you another chance. And if I keep in the straight and narrow, I'll be fine. But if I fall off again, I go down this road again, society says, no mas. So this puts in place, again, the accountability to that individual that would not have in the back of their minds that, if I fall down, no worry, they'll just put me back on this. We believe in second, third, and fourth chances, but there's a point where we say, look, if you won't help yourself, there's nothing else we can do at this point. I think it's a great amendment. It's a great bill. But it's only great for those, again, who want to change their lives, who have looked at their lives and come to the conclusion that, man, they went down this wrong path and wanting to correct themselves and going down this road. We're all for that. I don't think anybody in this hall disagrees with that. I mean, I think we all have family members for one way or another, for whatever it is, not necessarily drugs, but at some point you say, hey man, you know, what else can I do? What else can I do? We've helped you, and now you got to be able to help yourself. So this amendment just reinforces the fact that, look, okay, now the onus is on you now. Okay? This is what we're doing as a family, as a society. We're going to help you out. But you need to hold up your end of the deal to keep those bennies coming in. So with that, again, I stand in full support of this amendment, and likewise for the bill. So it's a great amendment, and I encourage my colleagues to vote in favor of the amendment. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the amendment, Senator Brown, you are recognized.
I also rise in support of this amendment. Certainly thank my good colleague, Senator Fisher, for introducing it. You know, they often say that if you don't work for something, you don't value it. And, you know, I think sometimes we're losing grasp of some of those fundamental values in our community. When you don't have to put any sweat into something, when things are just handed to you, maybe you don't appreciate it as much. Maybe you take it for granted. You know, my grandparents worked very hard, as I'm sure many of our grandparents did. Their parents, my parents, worked very hard, far more than I have in my life. I got to receive a lot of the benefits of their hard labor, as many of us have, as many of our younger generations coming up have. You know, we think that's how it should be. You know, you want to work hard, you want to give your children the better opportunities that maybe you didn't have in your life. But you know, at the other end, sometimes working for what you have, you appreciate it because you work for it, because you make sacrifice. And sometimes we lose sight of that because everything's so easy nowadays in our woke society. You know, we just allow things to happen and we just don't have to be responsible anymore because we can talk our way out of it or try and justify it or victimize ourselves with it, including some of the bad choices that we make. You know, and adversity in life is actually a good thing, I think, especially now that I'm getting older, because, you know, that's how you grow. That's how you learn. That's how you appreciate what you have in your life. And I think we sometimes lose sight of that. Again, it's not uncommon, Madam Speaker. We see it every day. My goodness. Someone's committed a crime, and then they go out and they get arrested, and they're back out again on the streets, and they're committing another crime. They haven't even been prosecuted for the last crime that they were charged with. And it just becomes a way of life. And it's normal. It's acceptable. Because an individual chooses to make those same decisions. And we say, oh, they didn't, you know, they didn't have the advantages, they didn't do their education, they don't come from much. So, you know, it's okay. So, it's okay, it's all right, let it go. It's okay. No problem. And I guess I could buy that, Madam Speaker, if we didn't live in a community right now where we got, you know, businesses out there, employers out there that are trying to get people to come and apply for jobs to work. If there were no other opportunity, then we could probably say, hey, we understand, say, you know, we can explain that. But when you have a community that wants people to work, that needs people, and the place you should go, employment, opportunities that are all around us, especially now, as we're trying to rebuild our community and our economy. When you can go to work and legitimately make a good living, and take care of yourself, and take care of your family, and be a responsible, contributing member of the society. When those opportunities are right there in front of us, but we choose not to do it because we think the alternative is the way to go, and harming our people and our families, our communities we claim we care about is the way to go. And we have gotten very laid back about that. I don't know, I'm just speaking of a position of frustration because I just see it and I don't understand how this is okay. Tell me who doesn't have scars on their legs and their knees, who have never been through adversity here, that the road is just paved, that we live that, you know, wonderful life. I don't know anybody, I'm not that person. I'm sure there's everybody here has had challenges. And you work hard and you try to get on track and you sacrifice to get to where you need to go in life. Because I certainly would want to see that for my own child, to think, oh, it gets handed to you because you're just because of who you are. No, I want my child to learn and be educated and work hard. And as I often tell them, if you don't, I'm going to cash it all in and give it to my favorite charity, because at least I know it's going to a good cause. And I just think we need to expect more of ourselves, and we need to require more of ourselves to be responsible, and not this, hey, they no second, third, fifth chance. No, there ain't, you know, we don't all have 9 lives. You don't get to keep reoffending and harming this community and you keep getting rewarded for it. I think we need to require more personal responsibility in this community. I think we'd have a better community if we did. That's not a bad thing. And it's not saying, oh man, you made a mistake, you're scarred for life. No, you have an opportunity to grow from adversity. That's how we learn. That's how we make better choices in our lives. But I don't think we should continue to reward bad behavior, especially for those that get up every day and work hard, especially those that do hard labor. You know, us, we're in the building with the air con. Well, there's a lot of other people that get out there and bust their you-know-whats every day to make it by. Some of them have several jobs. You know, I have a young man that works at a clinic that I go to, and I did not know he also had a second job, because I also went to a fast food restaurant at one of our food courts, and there he was again. Hi, ma'am, yes, you know, after work I come here. After I work at the clinic, I come here and I work here. I thought, wow, there's another one of those people that I run into that, you know, we talk about them. They got 2 or 3 jobs to make it by. Thank goodness he's young and has the energy. Can you imagine you're 50 or 60 years old having to do that? And there are people out in our community who are that age that still get up and go to work. Because some of them have to take care of their grandchildren because their own sons and daughters that they raise. They're not there to take care of their own children because they chose a different path. And they've got their parents who are elderly, who are getting sickly and up in the years, and they're the ones who are raising their children because the parent or parents, for whatever reason, have chosen not to take on that responsibility. There's honor in work. We can't all move forward when there's only a few people carrying the load. And it doesn't mean, oh, you know, we cancel people that, you know, they weren't perfect. Who's perfect here? Who didn't learn from their lessons? You know, who didn't touch the stove and get burned? So we had to find out, so are we really going to burn ourselves? We just had to check it out, and sure enough, what mom and dad told you, look. But we shouldn't glamorize it either. And especially when our community continues to suffer from these bad choices. If you want to make bad choices for yourself and you're the only one in your own little isolated world that is affected by it, then so be it. Have at it. But when your bad choices that you make in your life adversely affect the people around you, the people in this community, and the people in your society, then yeah, I think the rest of us have an issue with that. Some people want to glamour, hey, Lana, I'm a 3-term, 5-term convicted drug felon. Wow, look at me. Gosh, if I said that, I have a little bit of shame because I'm like, yeah, I made some really bad choices and I'm out here advocating so others don't. But I don't think we should say, oh, no problem, take advantage of the system, especially when we have a growing number of our own people on social welfare. Instead of less numbers, which means less people are out there who can, able-bodied people in our community who could be working and contributing are not working, are not out there working and earning a living, especially if they're out there not working and they're on drugs. I'd like to think that, you know, everybody's checking and the probation officers are checking, make sure everybody's not on drugs, but my goodness, we can't even guarantee supervisors. Bus drivers are checking on their employees that are driving our children and grandchildren around it. We can't even guarantee that, even though that's their job. They're not there every morning checking their bus drivers, because if there were, we wouldn't have the recent incidences that we've had, where bus drivers can't even properly operate the bus because they're, oh my goodness, they are so high that they can't even operate their bus, and they've been driving our kids around. That's how bad it is, people. But no, we'll wait until it's a major catastrophe, and then, oh my goodness, we're going to rush in here to be the saviors, right, when we get there. I think we need to work on the foundation. And there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, yes, we made mistakes, but you know what? If you want to go down a good road, then yes, you should be responsible. You need to make better choices, because otherwise, what reinforcement is there? What reinforcement is there for those in our society that continue to commit crimes time and time again? They make that their career, and they continue to harm our community, and it's not okay. I think we need to stand up here in this floor and say, you know what? It's not okay. And we're going to give you an opportunity, but you know what? If you keep screwing up time and time again, well, no, we don't keep giving you opportunities. Because this is where it's gotten us, where we are today in this society on this island, where we don't live freely, where we don't feel safe, where we can't guarantee the safety of our people. What a shame. I think my family deserves better. I think all our families deserve better than what's going on right now. But you're not going to get that if the idea is, hey, whatever, you know, don't worry, you fall, we're right there, and we'll keep being there to catch you. I think we've seen too much of the adverse consequences of that, Madam Speaker. So with that, you know, I thank the Speaker. But I also want to bring up a point with the sponsors. Now that there's a cost, he has a concern. It's a federal program. Last week, just last Monday? Same thing. Farm Services Agency, federal program that covers these type of disasters. Our own people work at FSA. But we don't care to really get into that, right? Because, oh, we want to help our people regardless. I think we just need to be consistent. If we're going to take a road, at least have some consistency with that, Madam Speaker. But with that, I rise in support of this amendment. Thank you to Senator Fisher for bringing it forth.
Thank you, Senator Brown. On the amendment, is there anyone else who'd like to be recognized on the amendment? If not, then Senator Fisher, you may close on the amendment.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This discussion has been both enlightening and very, very interesting. And I appreciate each and every one of the individuals who spoke on the amendment and will speak, I suppose, on the main motion. I was listening to some of the concerns that were raised. There was an issue about whether this is in some sense, the amendment, redundant, because under the parole and probation system, random drug testing is administered, and that of course is absolutely correct. But I would remind the principal sponsor of the bill that there are two species of individuals who will qualify for TANF and SNAP benefits. And if you'd care, it's on page 7 of the original bill, beginning at line 3. If the individual has successfully completed probation, parole, community corrections, a reentry court program, or any other post-conviction monitoring program, then they can get in. So I hope it is understood that if you have completed probation, or if you were incarcerated and now have completed your term of parole, you are no longer subject to testing or reporting or anything like that. You begin just as any other citizen would, except for some disabilities that will continue to apply. And I think where the gentleman is concerned about the redundancy issue is beginning on line 6 of page 7, and it says the individual is successfully complying with conditions of probation, parole, community corrections, etc., and so forth. Certainly, under that second species of qualifying individuals, they may be subject to drug testing. So I think that the individual, the principal sponsor, if he reflects on his language there, I think that he is partially wrong and partially right. Nevertheless, to me, this is a question of responsibility, and I say that when I completely appreciate the charity which with the original bill is offered. This is providing food security for individuals who, for whatever reason, may be facing malnourishment and hunger. So I do understand the charitable impulse, but at the same time, I also understand what has been said repeatedly, that there must be consequences to an action. One of my colleagues, I think it was Senator Blas, was pointing out that, you know, the disability that flows from your felony conviction is not in any wise the responsibility of the community. It is the individual himself who elected to commit the crime. Nevertheless, we have not shut the door on this individual. We have not excluded them or ostracized them from the community. Under this bill, we are actually giving them the opportunity to continue to receive SNAP and TANF benefits, but in return, and this is not egregious or overbearing or you know, too much of a burden on an individual, we're simply asking that the individual remain clean, drug-free, and that is a fair return for inviting them back into this program. If they choose not to stay clean, then that is, again, their choice, not ours. We are not here always to insulate and protect people from their own actions. This bill, which was offered, and I believe the amendment, which has been offered as well, together they require responsibility. we are entitled to presuppose that individuals who are receiving SNAP benefits and TANF remain clean. That is a fair assumption on the community's part, that they remain clean. We don't have to anticipate that they're going to fail, and then we have to rush in and fix the problem before it arises, because that's their problem. They're the ones who chose not to remain clean. I'm afraid that the bill, in a sense, has opened kind of a philosophical difference between members of the legislature. I sense that there is I guess a majority faction here who support the concept of responsibility. Those, as my colleague mentioned, who have responsibility or have worked in this trade, such as in the courts or in the vice speaker, in her instance, worked in, I guess, with the public defender's office. We see the mill that has arisen in the Superior Court of Guam, where people are just churned in and churned out on these programs with tens, breathtaking. I was in a courtroom once and a person had violated 30 times in their obligation to probation, yet the judge did not put that person in jail. It's always a head scratcher. It's about responsibility. It is not too much to ask that when somebody receives a benefit like this, that they renew their promise to the rest of us, which is they stay clean, they stop fomenting this criminal virus on the island, and repay the community by staying clean. I can appreciate I appreciate the gentleman's concern that it was a little bit redundant, but it's not entirely redundant. So I just hope my colleagues will support it, and I look forward to 1 minute, Madam Speaker. What about thank you very much, ma'am. I really appreciate the break that you gave me there. I look around the chamber and I see there is significant absence in the chamber to work on this important bill as well as this amendment. So I would ask the Speaker to issue a call of the House to get these individuals in to vote.
Are you making a motion for the call of the House?
Thank you very much, ma'am. Motion to call the House.
On that motion, all in favor of the call of the House, please raise your hand. Motion fails.
Okay.
We have an amendment. Is there any objection on the amendment? There's an objection. So all in favor, please raise your hand. Motion fails. Amendment fails. So we're back on the bill. And so is there anyone who hasn't yet spoken on the bill who would like to speak on the bill? Senator Barnett on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Great discussion this morning on this measure, which I do support. I'm also supported that amendment. I thought it was going to pass, and I'm sure that this bill is going to pass. And I know a lot of the discussion has been about, some of the discussion has been about rewarding. There's been this train of thought that by allowing convicted felons to avail of the SNAP benefits that we're somehow rewarding bad behavior. And let me just preface what I'm about to say by saying that there are only a couple things that I hate more than crystal methamphetamine. I cannot stand crystal methamphetamine and what it's done to our island. But I'm just not sure that we're going to be rewarding convicted felons who can avail of SNAP benefits, because we are talking about people who have already endured their punishment for the crime. We're talking about people who have completed their sentences. And I'm just not sure we're talking about drug dealers, because the drug dealers are getting off. The drug dealers are getting off, and you know who the drug dealers are by who represents them in court. It's always the same few lawyers that represent the drug dealers, and they get off, and the drug dealers are not applying for SNAP because they're not getting convicted and they're getting away with it. And I wanted to kind of put some, a little personal touch to this, and talking about some of the people who have been affected by this lifetime ban. We're talking about a lifetime ban if you're a convicted felon. You can never get on SNAP. And I know one of the previous speakers had talked about Baby Joe Timinglow and his repeated run-ins with the law. And I know we're all scratching our heads wondering how someone can continue to commit violent crimes that jeopardize our community, but then turn around and get released back out into the community to commit more crimes. That's one example of a failure, and I'll just say it. But I know another fighter, another former mixed martial arts fighter, who over 10 years ago was convicted. It was a felony conviction related to crystal meth. And I'll just say that on our island, we're very, it doesn't seem like it, but we're very strict on the punishment for meth. Any possession of crystal methamphetamine is a felony, whether you are the man or a low-level street user that we're arresting out there on the streets. And so this gentleman that I know was convicted, again, a felony conviction over a decade ago. But in that 10 years, he has completely turned his life around. He's a father of 3 children, works very hard in the recovery community. But because this man, and I don't want to say made a mistake, right? Because it is a choice. I agree with some of the previous speakers. But because this man made a choice and caught that conviction, he could never get on the SNAP benefits. And it's a struggle when we have these people who are addicted to drugs, who catch that case, catch that conviction, and are released back out into the community where you can get crystal meth for, and I think it was Senator Brown who had talked about the price of a fast food meal, it seems like nowadays. And so think about the community that we're sending these people back out into, sending them out into a community where Matsutsude meth, and we all know it. The meth is everywhere. It's cheaper than it's ever been. And so we send these people out into this community after they paid their debts to society, and it's almost like we set them up for failure. And this man was his family's breadwinner, paid his debts to society, was released back out into the community, works very hard in the recovery world, but has to work even harder because someone standing next to him who wasn't convicted of a felony will get those SNAP benefits that he can't. I also know of a recovery mom. That's what they call them, recovery moms. And this lady is 70 years old, 70-year-old lady. And she too was convicted. It was a felony about 12 years ago. But she has become one of the prominent leaders in the recovery community. But she can't get the SNAP. She's already paid her debt to society. And I get what the amendment was about, and that's why I voted for it. But I think a lot of the issues with the crystal meth and the epidemic that we're facing as an island it's not necessarily the fault of the people that we arrest through what I like to call incidental bycatch. And I know Senator Duenas is a fisherman. Incidental bycatch is when you cast a net for one thing and then you end up catching, something else entirely. And so while these police officers are out here patrolling our streets, they'll pull over somewhere with a broken taillight. And they'll find crystal meth, whether it's residue in a pipe or baggies or whatever, right? And so these low-level addicts who are suffering from a disease, yes, suffering from addiction to one of the most dangerous substances known to man. If you look up treatment for crystal meth, FDA treatments, there's no treatment. That's why I feel like if you're convicted, you pay your debt to society. I don't think we're rewarding people. I think we're trying to do what we can as a government to help them succeed against tremendous odds, where so many of our people fail. And it's heartbreaking to see these stories like the Baby Joe timing lows. But there are other stories of other people who didn't end up like that, who made it out alive, who made a conscious commitment because of where they've been to help others out of the mess they're in. And so I'm hesitant to blame these low-level drug addicts for the circumstances that we see out here in the community. Now, granted, if you're addicted to drugs, that's one thing, but when you're so kineni that you're willing to jeopardize and endanger our community through violent means, through theft, then I agree, you should be punished. Definitely, you should be punished. But the problem is not necessarily the low-level addict on the street. The problem is, like one of our previous speakers said, that alleged drug dealers on this island rub elbows with the highest level of government officials. And that's the problem, is outside of the limited treatment options that we have, and I want to shout out to everybody who works in treatment and recovery, facing often what seems like insurmountable odds, but they get up every day and they try and do the good work. But when you have alleged drug dealers throwing concerts, opening restaurants, starting businesses that get government contract after government contract after government contract, that's the problem, is we are letting the drug dealers slide. And when we try and do something about it, oh, we can't do another Mandania because we don't have enough officers. So let's focus on treatment. We're simply not doing enough to bust and take down the people who are poisoning our community, the people who are making meth so readily available out here on the island. And God knows our people are already, on any given day, waking up at a deficit, waking up struggling with issues that many times lead people to turn to addiction. And our people are losing. They're losing. Because all too often it seems like these drug dealers, again, who we seem to be celebrating on our island, are getting away with it because they're good. They're good with people at Adelup. They're good with people at the court. They don't have to worry. And we all know it, and we all see it. Yet we come in here and we talk about punishing the average Joe Cruz with a busted taillight who's clearly struggling with addiction, but is not flooding our streets with the substance that he's addicted to. And I think we as a body can definitely try and do more and work harder to make sure that these drug dealers who are really good friends with some of the highest elected officials on this island who get away with it, we can do more to make sure they are punished. Because if we don't, then we're just setting our people up to fail. We are. They're getting arrested. They're serving their time. And if they make it out of DOC, where some people say it's easier to get meth than it is out here on the street, they make it out of DOC, they come out here on the street, and then they've got to deal with everybody that they used to run with, that temptation. And maybe because they don't get the SNAP benefits. Maybe because they are never going to get the SNAP benefits for as long as they live. It doesn't just affect them. It affects their kids. It affects their houses. It affects the generations of people who live under that roof. And so I don't think anyone is trying to reward anybody here for bad behavior. I think that in this situation, because of crystal methamphetamine and how hard it is to beat, not just as an individual, but as a community, that we need to make sure that when you serve your time and you come out and you're carrying that conviction, that we give you a reason to not turn back to that life. Because if you can't get SNAP and you're out here trying to get a job and you've got that on your record and it's hard, SNAP helps people get jobs after they have a felony conviction. But if they can't get it, how are they going to feed their family? They're going to turn right back to crime, right? They're going to be ripping the copper out of the generator, doing whatever they can to make ends meet and put food on the table. And so I stand in support of this measure. And I think that it's just one thing that we can do to help stem the tide. And there are many other things that I think we can do, that, especially to hit harder and to make these drug dealers uncomfortable. And I think that this body has done great things, and I see measures like that coming. And so I would just ask my colleagues to support this measure, as I am. And thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you, Senator. On the bill, is there anyone else who hasn't spoken on the bill who would like to speak? If not, then the sponsor may close on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. When I think about this bill, I think of two ways you could look at it: with your mind and with your heart. When I look at what my mind tells me, it tells me that this bill, this addition to this program, it will cost us nothing. It adds more federal dollars to Guam at no cost to us. Nobody gets pushed out. Someone who would otherwise avail of this program is not going to be pushed out because somebody else took their spot. That's not how it works. Everybody gets help here. This will help prevent the crime we are afraid of by solving the practical problem. Because if we don't help these people find food, then they will help themselves to find food. They will help themselves to our bush cutters, to our copper wiring generators, to our schools during typhoons. So, even among the most cynical of people, they can see that we can't afford not to do this. The question before this body really is, do we want more money at no cost to us to help our people of Guam? And if I'm answering with my mind, that answer is yes. But then I consider the arguments of the heart. Addiction. We've all been through the disaster that is this typhoon. So consider those with addiction. Their family and friends and those closest to them have to watch that disaster happen in slow motion day after day. And recovery starts with community. And one of the things that binds community together is food and drink. Since before history, we have been in communion with each other, breaking bread and supporting each other. Recovery starts with food, and that is the glue that holds societies together. It is the first step for these people to come back. And we should not be denying them food. This modern age we live in is hard enough. There are plenty of ways to inflict punishment on people, include more hardships on them so that they really feel the consequences of their action. But it shouldn't be done with food. This is America. And in America, once you've paid your debt to society, you get to have a clean slate. And part of that is availing yourself of these programs to help yourself get on your feet. But more importantly, this is Guam. We do not let people on Guam go hungry or starve. That is not who we are. Often, the smart thing to do and the right thing to do are sometimes in conflict. But today, they are not. Today, the smart thing to do is the right thing to do. As a Catholic, I believe in the power of forgiveness and the power of second chances and helping our neighbor and helping those who are struggling in this life, because in all our lives we will struggle and we will need a hand up. And so it behooves us to help our neighbors and be good citizens and a good community to each other. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, of needing clothing and clothe you? When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you? The Lord will reply, truly I tell you, whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. So I ask my colleagues to please support this bill, and I would like to amend it so that Senator Barnett, Senator Barnes, and Senator San Augustine be added on as co-sponsors at their request. And I believe Senator Amanda Shelton requested as well. And at this time, I'd like to make a motion to recess till 2.
All right, let's first take the motion for the addition of sponsors. Is there any objection to that motion? No objection. Seeing no objection, motion carries. Amendment passes. And now you have another motion? I can't. Please raise your hand if you have an objection. All right, we're back on the motion to add sponsors. Is there an objection? No objection. To add sponsors? Yes. Yeah, no objection. That's what I just called. No objection to sponsors. Motion passes. Amendment carries. You have another motion?
Yes, I'd like to motion to recess, ma'am.
There's an objection to the motion to recess. All in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. There's a motion to recess until 2 p.m.?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all in favor of the motion, please raise your hand. Motion fails.
Madam Speaker, I move to place Bill number 20-37 COR-LS as amended onto the third reading file.
On the motion to place Bill number 20-37 COR as amended by the committee and further amended on the floor to the third reading file, there's been an objection. All in favor, please raise your hand. This is a motion to place the bill as amended onto the third reading. All in favor, please raise your hand. Motion fails. Thank you, Senator. We're now on recess until 2 p.m.